Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. We're gonna wait a minute and then get going. This is recorded. So anyone who doesn't make it, there will be a recording available for you to take a look at. Everyone is muted, so if you do have a question, please use your chat box. At the end of the seminar, we'll have a little question period. If you have some questions that you don't want to ask on here, feel free to call me, send me a text message, get a hold of me via email. If something pops in your head later tonight, if you're thinking about the videos or the pictures that you saw tonight, feel free to reach out to me in any way, shape, or form. So we're just going to get going here. I just got to let a few people in. I'm hosting plus managing this one. So tonight, Alex, I was lucky enough to get a driver on Sunday or 2 Sundays ago, and Alex came up and gave me a hand. Alex, a local sailor here. We're good buddies. We sail a lot of boats together. He was driving the boat, and he's also a very good sailor, so he was able to take a look at a lot of the stuff that I was looking at. So he's just going to have some comments throughout the night on some of the pictures and stuff we talk about. I'm going to do a little bit of a different format. Before, I would take a lot of videos around the corners and just talk about each video. Tonight, we're actually going to focus mainly, we're going to talk about the race, but we're also going to mainly focus on Mainsail Twist and what that looks like. We're not going to take much of your time tonight. It should hopefully wrap this up in about 45 minutes. So let's get started. The first thing, I am going to run through the 3 starts. Starts, I think, are always really important. Then we're going to chat about the starts. I didn't have my camera on HD mode, so that is my fault. So you can still get a concept of what's going on here, but usually the videos are a little better quality. My apologies for that. So this is the first start, and you can kind of see Dusty Mock there coming in from the pin, and that would be like a port tack approach. As you can see this happening, you can see 2 boats coming at him, and you can see him right here making the decision to go ahead of them and tack and go for the pin. This is for this type of breeze and current. Usually it is, get off the pin, put the bow down, and race for the beach. I think the team on Dusty Mock did a great job of positioning themselves, but I think the other 2 boats just had a little bit more mow and steam at the time, and it's a little bit difficult in that light air, and you can see there's a little bit of a swell to get that boat moving. So maybe doing that maneuver slightly earlier could have got him going out, because that was kind of the perfect port tack approach at the pin. And let's just watch that again. And you know what, if that was, a boat that was lighter, had a big mainsail and got going a little quicker, let's say like something similar size, so say a Melgis 24 or something, that would have been the perfect grounding. But since the boat and the wind was just a little bit lighter, the boat's a little bit heavier, it just takes a little bit more time for the wheels to get turning. I'm sure Edward knows that. He sailed this boat probably longer than I've race sailboats. But I thought it was just a really good positioning and setup. And if he didn't have 2 boats like steamrolling down, Edward would have been able to put his bow down there and he just would have taken off. So I thought that was a pretty good start for Dusty Mock plus the other 2 boats. Everyone else, you can see, everyone was really up towards the line. It's hard to see people past the pin, but if you saw earlier in the start line, it looked like the majority of the fleet was up at the start line and giving themselves a good chance to get off the start with good speed. Any comments on that, Alex?
I think it's a really good port side approach, and probably would be doing the same thing here. And like, as you know, in Vancouver, you always race to the beach, and I just think the timing was a little bit off, but all in all, it's a really good strategy for the start. I think if it would be one design fleet, and the race course wouldn't be so one side favorite. I would probably start somewhere 1/3 of the start line up. Like, because I think it's like usually from the pin, you always have like one or two boats get off the pin, and the rest of the fleet is getting jammed because of the traffic and other issues. But here, when you race with like 10, 15 boats in the start line, that's you can get definitely way more free space and execute your start plan. So all in
Yeah,
all, a good plan.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think what he's saying there is just in bigger fleets, you'd be a little bit more conservative unless you're really confident that you could be one of those top two boats off the fleet. I usually break my starts up into thirds. And when I'm talking to the skipper, I say, I want you to start the boat end third, I want you to start the middle third, or I want to start you at the pin end third. And if you start anywhere inside that third, as long as you have good room to go high load, low load, that's what's important. It's not just about getting off the pin. So being a little bit more safe. So let's bounce into start number 2. So again, pretty light air here, guys. So, something that I like to do in lighter air is maybe do a couple test runs to the line before the start. And that allows me to get a sense of time on distance, because the time on distance, how long it's going to take you to get your boat up to speed, changes as the wind increases or decreases. So getting out there in the current wind conditions, in the current wave conditions, and figuring out how long it takes you from 2-3 boat lengths away from the start line to get up to full speed. Because we all know at the perfect start, you're at full speed, at the gun, sails all pulled in, clearing lane, bow out. But having a perfect start doesn't happen every time, as everyone knows. So you can see here again, 2 boats kind of fighting for the pin. It almost turned the volume on. That was a great, what a start. As you can hear me say, I'll turn the volume back off so you can hear me chatting. But we had Legacy and Jason Vandergag there taking off the pin. Vandergag in that position, it's a great start. The thing is, he doesn't have the ability to get his bow down, so he's got to stay, stay a little bit high. John could go bow down, or he could start trying to work up towards Jason, and then depending on who's on a high mode or low mode, and that's kind of where you really want to focus your skipper on driving and having, say, your main sheet trimmer or your tactician talking about going low mode, going high mode. And that's basically relative to the boat below you. So you don't sail into them, or you don't sail up into another boat and into their dirty air. So communication is very key when you're starting very close to a boat and you're going to be on that tack for a little while. Any comments to that?
I think you brought up really good point there about like figuring out the timing and time and distance. I think most of the programs I sail with, every time we get on the water, we try to nail at least like 4 or 5 practice starts before race. So we get a feel of the timing to the line, we get used to the conditions on the start line, and it helps a lot because you're better off when you have this knowledge and these numbers. And another good thing to have depends on what boat you sail, like let's say on the Melgus 24, we have this magic number, how slow you can go in the box. So in Melgus 24, for us, it's like 2.1, 2.3 knots. And that's a kind of critical point when we are approaching the start line and we're like, okay, we are like 2.3 boat speed. And that's a good call for us, that foils of the boat, they stop working, because the slower you go, the more you start to go sideways. So I'd probably recommend to dial this number in for your boat, so in what stage you're going to start drifting sideways. Because if you're started sailing too high in the box, your speed is dropping, then you're bearing away and you don't have any speed. It's going to take a while to get the traction back on your boat. So if you have a speed to the water and the number, what allows you to move through the water, it's definitely going to improve your game in the start box. That's probably
that's a very good point, Alex. And then as the keels get longer and thinner, it becomes more important. More with a full keeled boat, you're going to be able to glide a lot more. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you know, it depends on what boat you have. So those numbers change depending on if you're in a sport boat or if you're an older style boat and the size of your keel and all that stuff. The biggest thing is knowing when you're losing flow on your foils, and when you pull your main sheet in, you go sideways instead of forward. So very good point there, Alex. So this is the last start. This is kind of a big start line for the majority of the fleet. There we go. Luckily it loaded for us. So we actually have another really good start here, and if I turn the audio on, I won't. Jason let us know he was surprised no one fought for the pin with him. So he was down here and he actually had a pretty good start, but it's a lot easier when you know, managing your time on distance when you're not worried about other boats. Saying that, having a start like this is still a very difficult you know, situation to put yourself into, and he did a very good job getting off the pin here. This is a big start line. You know, I would always suggest, if it's a big start line, so you have lots of room in the start line, never put yourself right beside another boat. You know, if you see someone lining up for the pin, unless you really need to win that pin and you need to win this race to win the whole series or whatever, you know, make sure you give yourself a little room. There's no need to be, you know, like, you know, haul the haul getting off the start line. You know, one of you is gonna get hurt by that. So you can see here everyone was evenly spaced out, so I kind of like that. We're going to get into, and I just wanted to talk about start. So what do you want from a start? So when you get on the water, and you know, I say, you know, you go do some practices, and then you know, you can kind of see they're getting ready to put up that class flag. So first of all, you want to have a plan before the 5 minutes on where you like to start. So when you're doing these practice starts, usually as a tactician, I'll be looking at both ends of the pin. Sometimes I'll pick a boat in the fleet. I'll ask them to start at the boat and I start at the pin, and maybe go out for a minute and do a tack and come back and see which boat which side paid. That's one way to do it. Kind of have a sparring partner out there. You want to figure out if you're doing a port or starboard approach. So a port approach is what we saw Dusty Mock do. Starboard approach is just your traditional coming in on starboard and just slowly making your way to the start line. You want to make a plan to ensure you'll be at the location that you plan to start. Okay, so you want to make the plan so that you're like, I need to start down near the pin. So these are the things we want to be doing. I want to be at this spot at 2:30. I want to be over here in about a minute. I want to make my way down to the start line on the final approach. Or if you're Dusty Mock there, you're like, I want to be at the pin on starboard or on port. I want to jibe around, sail at the fleet, and then tack at 20 seconds, get boat speed off the line at go. So you need to make a plan to ensure when you're thinking about the location you want to start, that you know that plan includes that. You want to execute your plan as best as possible. Sailing, so many variables. You know, you have a plan in your head. It always doesn't work out the way that you want it to. I would say, you know, maybe 50% of the time it works out the way you want to, or maybe even less. Like, so you got to roll the punches. So things will change. You know, it's always good to have a contingency plan too. You know, it's tough on those starts where everyone's trying to go to the beach. Usually when you get bad air or a bad start, you might do a clearing tack. So that's what I would call that. You would call it a clearing tack. So you might want to tack out onto port, sail a couple boat lengths, make sure your boat gets back up to boat speed or your target speed, then tack back on the starboard to make yourself back towards the beach, unless for whatever reason you think you want to go onto the right side of the course. You want to have a good size house to start in. So what I was talking about on that last start was that there was lots of room. So I call it a house. So you kind of build your house is the area around you in a starting box. So when you're on the start line, you want to have decent room to leeward and decent room to windward. So you have ability to slow your boat down, go up to windward, and you have ability to speed your boat up and go down to leeward. And that allows you to have a good start. It's always really difficult to start with a boat really like underneath you. And it's also really difficult to start with a boat just above you, you know, and especially if they're further forward on the start line. And then at the end of the day, you know, from a good start, if you can be on the line full speed as the gun goes off, you know, that is almost just as important as starting at the favorite end, unless one end is majorly favored or one side of the course is majorly favored and you can't get to that side of the course if you start on a certain end. But, you know, say if you're not at the top third of the fleet, if you can get off the start line at full speed when the gun goes, you'd be surprised, how far up the fleet you will be in the first couple tacks. Any comments on any of that?
Oh,
Alex?
that's pretty good. I think you covered pretty good. I think just maybe one thing, like I know that a lot of people use Velocitex and the instruments for the distance to the line and stuff like that. So quick comment on that. I think before the race, guys, it's really good to understand what your numbers are on a port and starboard tack and know your average number on the starboard, what your heading is. So the last 2 minutes, you understand, whereas you're in a left shift and a right shift. And the thing, when you're in a last minute, you're in your final approach, you start approaching the line, and sometimes those meters on the Velocitex, they start to be eating quicker than the seconds on it. And it means that you're in the right shift, you got to slow down. And so you're like, okay, like when we said with Drew, like, hey, Drew, like those meters going down pretty quick. Like we got to figure out what we're doing here. Let's slow it down. Or if we see that the meters going down pretty slow and we are already like at 50 seconds and it's like meters counting super slow, we're like, okay, that's a left shift. The distance to the line got longer. So let's speed the things up and get going. That's another thing to keep an eye on for those who use electronics for the start line.
Perfect. So was going to the beach the right call? So I think for the majority of the fleets, going to the beach was the right call. But and the reason was that just with the wind and the current direction, it's 99% of the time in English Bay, it's a race to the beach, and basically you get over the beach and you kind of short tack the beach, which usually means a pin end start, bow down, and fast forward to the beach. So this makes the start very important. Try not to actually go on the beach itself when I'm talking about go to the beach. Get far in there. Don't go inside the dolphins. That sandbar changes, almost weekly with the tides. So you got to be pretty careful. You usually keep an eye on the depth sounder if you have one. There was a boat that ended up on the beach, literally, sailed onto the beach. They got off, luckily. But that is traditional Vancouver racing is getting to the beach. So it makes the start really important. If you get a good clean start and you can stay on starboard, especially when we had the start line pretty far out in the middle of the bay, being able to stay on that starboard tack for say 5-8 minutes, that makes a big deal than if you were to start in bad air, you had a bad start, you're just following everyone. It's usually not the best play. One thing that we saw, Alex and I saw, and it was on the first start, there was definitely a river on the right side of the start line. And there was one boat, I don't know what boat it was, but they tacked out right. I'm not sure if they had a bad start or if that was their plan, but there was also a little bit more wind. Like the wind was pretty light at that first start. I would say very light, like 3 to 4 knots. And there was just a nice little puff over on the right-hand side towards West Vancouver. And they definitely got into a bit of a river. They were basically just climbing on the whole fleet. And then what you want to do when you get that, and the traditional thing is to get to the beach, you want to, once you get your leverage, so you've made it up course, you want to tack back and almost tack on top of the rest of the fleet that's down here and kind of stay between the mark and the fleet. And that way you can't, that way majority of the time the fleet can't really get at you if you're trying to keep yourself between the mark and the fleet. Another thing is, you made those big gains, and you can actually see a lot of boats seeing this boat, and they were tacking outright. Saying that, it ended up dying outright, and you really wanted to fight back over left. I think if that was your game plan to go right, then that was okay. But if your game plan was to go left and you saw one boat kind of take a bit of a flyer and make a big gain, I am a traditionalist and always try to stay with the game plan and not kind of chase what's happening over on the right unless you're really sure, because by the time you get over there to the right, and I saw a couple boats do that, the wind died out, the current, that river had dissipated, and you're almost in worse conditions over on the right, and the wind was starting to come down the beach. So I think the beach was the right call. I think one boat made a pretty cool call and went out right, and it gained. The big thing is when you do make big gains on the fleet, doing something that's that's not ordinary in that venue. I'd always make sure that you use it and kind of consolidate and get back on top of the fleet and kind of try to keep yourself between the mark and the fleet to make sure that, you know, those gains you made early on don't get taken away later on because you stayed, you kept going and you weren't, and you know, people gain on the other side of the course. Any comments on that, Alex?
Oh no, it's pretty good. You got it really good. Just to maybe don't forget to put the freighters in the equation, because we saw quite a few boats having a great start, being really good off the line, but then they would kind of like end up in the middle of the freighter, like pointing straight to the freighter, and like they're like, well, we got to get to the right. And at that stage, it was not necessarily the right thing to do. So kind of look forward and put freighters in the equation. Yeah.
Totally. And like even off the start line, like sometimes it's like, you know, the first couple boats off the pin will make the stern of the freighter, and then the rest of the boats might be in the middle. So if you start in the middle of the line or pin third, you end up either having to go around the stern, which is usually pretty slow in a westerly because you're going to be going in a wind shadow. So you might want to end up starting further up the line, even though you don't want to be too far up the line. You might do that so that you don't have to do too many tacks. You know, every tack is at least a boat length, maybe two. So you kind of have to put that in your equation. Freighters are definitely part of racing in Vancouver. Very good point, Alex. Okay, so Mainsail Twist, that's what we're here for tonight. So I kind of wanted to focus on something. So Alex and I, if you could tell, we were kind of chasing down boats and from the stern on the way upwind, and we were kind of taking looks at how people had their mainsail set up and how the twist was set up. So Mainsail Twist is a combination of main sheet and the Traveler, sometimes boom vang as well. The majority of the time you want to ensure your boom is on center line. So we're talking about close hauled here, okay? So you want your boom, basically, if you have a backstay, you want it at your backstay location. You want to ensure your top tail is not stalled, okay? If your top tail is always flying behind your sail, then you want to be adding more twist, okay? And if your top tail is flying 100% of the time, you want to be taking away twist. So in this picture here, you could probably tell the left setup is a sail with a lot of twist, okay? So the boom's a little higher up. You can see the twist in the mainsail. And then when you pull the boom down, what happens is you take the twist out of the sail. So the leech starts closing, okay? Depending on the breeze strength and the sea state, you want the top telltale stalling anywhere from 25% to 75% of the time, okay? So what type of twist do you want? Okay, so we're just gonna go through 3 different types of winds. In light winds, you want a lot of twist, okay? You want twist to induce sail flow. How you get that twist is Traveler up, main sheet ease to the center line, okay? So I would usually start with pulling the Traveler all the way up, then I would ease that main sheet down so that the boom is on center line, so at the backstay position, okay? And then see how much that top telltale's flying. And if you think it could, if it's flying 100% of the time, you drop that Traveler down. When you drop that Traveler down, the boom's gonna drop past center line. You're gonna have to pull on that main sheet to pull it back up. You're gonna be taking a little bit of twist out of the sail. And it's constant little adjustments like that to try to get that top telltale. I would say, you know, in flat water, 25% of the time. Medium winds, you wanna start powering up the sail. Okay, so you wanna start taking the twist out and closing that leech. So now you're dropping that Traveler around the center. And you basically add more that says mainsail tension, that should say main sheet tension. You want more main sheet tension, okay? Then in heavier winds, you know, you want your Traveler around or below center line with good main sheet tension. Okay, usually there's not too much twist from your main sheet itself. The way that you can add twist on your mainsail is adding backstay. So when you pull your backstay on, it actually, so it induces mast bend. And what that does is it flattens your mainsail. It starts the curvature of your mast starts matching the curvature of your left curve of the mainsail. So your sail starts flattening out, and it also twists open your mainsail or adds twist because the top of the mast is going back. Okay. Also talking about vang sheeting here. Okay, you can use your vang for vang sheeting. some boats, especially racer cruisers, will have a shorter traveler than needed. Even in a Melges 32 that we have, Melges 24, they have relatively short travelers. So what you need to do is if you're in heavy winds and you're all out of traveler and you've added your backstay, what you can do is you can pull your boom bang on, and you do this in a laser a lot of the times. And what you'll do is the boom bang, when you ease your main sheet, your boom bang now your boom doesn't go up anymore. It just goes out. So basically you've tensioned your vang so that your boom stays still. And now if you ease your main sheet, it just opens up like a door as if it's a continuation of your traveler. So those are kind of the three setups. One thing I just quickly wanted to chat about was, in flat water, you can have less twist, and in choppier water, you want more twist. The reason flat water is you're staying in your steering groove is very easy. So you can kind of have like a little bit tighter of a leech. In choppier water, you're going to want a little bit more twist. So you have a little bit more allowance, a little bit more forgiveness in your trim. So you can keep that boat moving, especially when it falls off a big wave. Any comments to that, Alex?
No, it's pretty good. Do you mind to go one slide back for a second?
Yeah, of course.
It's actually a really good picture of here, like two mainsails, two different like setups. I'm just gonna try really quick go through how I look in the mainsail trim through the range of conditions. Like when we were like in super light breeze, we were seeking for power, and we usually like sail traveler up, main sheet out, like a lot of twists, trying to get powered up as much as possible. And then as breeze is picking up, like if I would be trimming, I would probably like, okay, like it's picking up, I kind of can get rid of the twist here, and I would lower down the traveler and bring the main sheet in more and more. Then when my traveler essentially would reach the center line as breeze is building up, and the boat is powered up and you feel comfortable, and that's the point where the sail is closed, the traveler in the center line, and the boat is just powered up enough not to be in kind of like a constant fight to get head to the wind. It's like when the boat reaches design speed of the boat, and anything above that, you want to start to depth powering the sail, and you kind of, I'm not a huge fan of running the traveler below the center line because you essentially start to put the mainsail in the slot. I usually start to go up on the traveler and out on the main sheet a bit, kind of putting the twist back in the sail, but I usually try to keep this slot open so I don't run the jib over and the slot, and I don't close the slot with the mainsail. So this is my approach on it, and it was a really good point about the twist, more twist in the mainsail when it gets choppy. And I think the top of that first bit, it was a perfect example when you really needed that twist up top just to keep the leech bouncing and sort of pumping itself on every wave. So that's
like
my small input.
Yeah, no, very, very good point. And adding twist twisting induces sail flow, but it also spills air in big breeze. And different boats kind of like different setups, and you need to know your boat and be able to get out there and practice and figure out what setup your boat likes and boat uses. And the twist changed, and we'll see here in the pictures, the twist would change. So in the start, it was really light, so we had big twists. Then you kind of got into flat water, medium air when that breeze kind of filled down. So you'd be pretty tight on the leech. And then you got into same sort of breeze, but bigger chops. So you probably wanted to add a little bit more twist, maybe even a little bit more depth to your sail to make sure you got through the chop, like easing the outhaul a little bit. So there's little control. So this is the first picture. So this is like a sail with a lot of twist, okay? The boom could be slightly higher, but I think the twist was pretty good. You can see up in the top there, the telltale is flying. As I was talking about earlier, you always want to use your backstay for rough location for the boom height / center line. Okay, so good, nice twist here. Good, like the boat is heeled over nicely. And the boom could just come up a little bit. Then going into, so here we got Sillet. There's less twist than the previous picture, okay? Boom is on or slightly above the center line, okay? But that looks like nice twist, okay? That sail, it's hard to see here, but that top telltale was flying probably 25% of the time, maybe 50. So here we can see Thursday Child. There was a similar twist profile. Boom probably can come up about an inch or two, but other than that, that top tail was flying. I really liked the lower end of this sail. So there was a bit of this was kind of a third of the way up the beat. You can kind of see Spanish Banks there in the distance, and they had eased their out haul where a lot of people were pretty tight on the out haul. I really liked how Thursday Child, the Nick's team, really the shape at the bottom of the sail, and you can kind of look down here, was pretty. It wasn't too full, but it was just enough to get them powered up. Because at this point, you know, they're getting that medium breeze, maybe 8 knots and building. So they're starting to take the twist out of their mainsail, but they also powered up their sail by giving the out haul a little bit of ease. So really nice setup there. There's 3 boats here. Over here, it's not the best shot, but this is Jason. I always try to line the backstay up with the mast. So on the far left-hand side, this is Ultraman. You can see the backstay running up the inside of the luff of the mainsail. But this was just at the start, and you can see that they had really good twists, and you can see that the water was pretty light. Then over here, we've got Through and Excalibur, and you can see now that they're in different conditions that they're closing their leach. But all 3 of these sails, even though they're slightly different setups, they have the top telltale flying. Okay, so that is the most important part, depending on the conditions you're sailing. The biggest thing is having that top telltale flying and making sure that it is stalling a little bit, but it's not always stalled. And going in behind these boats, we always saw that top telltale showing its face a little bit. And if it wasn't, there was quick adjustment made by the mainsail trimmer. Okay, so here, and these are also different boats in different states, but you can't see as much of the sail. So there's kind of minimal twist on these 3 photos. And any comments on any of these pictures we've been talking about, Alex?
Not as much. I think that like it may be advice for newcomers to sailing, to people new to racing. One of the things that like it's better to keep more twist in the sail and keep sails a bit more easy than super tight, because it's just gonna make your life easier as a driver if you're new to the sailing. You have not figured out what the groove is for your boat. It's probably better to keep the sails a bit more easy and closed. That's the first thing. And do you mind to go one slide back? And another thing, what can be super helpful with your sail setup, most of the sails, they have the draft stripes on it. And like you can see like a picture on all those pictures, the draft stripes, it's a white stripe on the sail. And they kind of like, by looking at those, you can really gauge how much depth you got in the sail, how open the sail in the top third and a middle and at the bottom third. So I usually refer most of the settings we do and changes we do to the draft stripes, because those are there for a reason, and it's a good tool to use in your sail trim.
For sure. And all and when a boat really hooks in and you have a really good driver, you can take the twist out. So as Alex was saying, like, and in Vancouver, it's usually lighter air, so you're usually on the more twisty side of things. But once that boat gets locked in and your boat's at full speed, you can really close that leach. And some boats, like I've never really raced the J30 before, but a J24, you can actually shut off that whole top telltale. And if you're hooked in, you just get more points. So you literally just keep pulling on that main sheet, and it's untraditional. It's usually not what works. But in J24, for whatever reason, once you get up to that nice speed and your driver's in the groove, in that like optimal speed, you can do that. But if you're outside of that, you really need to twist to make sure that your boat's still going. Okay, so that was all about twist, guys. Just kind of going through like a lot of twist, middle twist, and these are obviously minimal twist. We're going to get into the windward mark roundings. So, after a long leg, it's pretty easy just to do one long last tack. But I find, and especially in Vancouver, where we're usually dealing with current, If you do a ley line that's, I would say, more than 10 boat lengths, it's even if it's 5 boat lengths, sometimes it's hard to judge depending on how quickly the current's running. So I find long ley lines are hard to judge. So I would recommend going with a shorter ley line. So, and sometimes, you're out, say on the left or right side, and you want to tack towards the mark, tack a little early. And if you get lifted, like you're going to get lifted towards the mark. So it's a good thing. Tacking right on a ley line really far out when you don't really need to, if there's not lots of boats stacked up, kind of, there is a chance you're going to overstand or understand, and just making that ley line a little bit shorter will give you a better chance of sailing less boat lengths around the course. My next comment was, definitely this move at this mark was a gybe set. And the main reason for that was if you didn't have a clean hoist, you ended up taking a while to get your kite up. By the time you got your kite up and filled and you were ready to jibe, got your jib down and you're ready to jibe, you'd actually be reaching because you'd have to get around that dolphin. So you end up not sailing VMG, you end up sailing a hotter angle than you normally would if you got your kite up a little quicker. So just to prevent all of that, doing a jibe set, getting the kite up, and just started making it down course. And the VMG on the port jibe was actually like better when you went around the mark. You were actually kind of pointing towards the finish line than if you just raised your kite and started sailing towards UBC. Also, it was very wavy, and with like that type of breeze, you wouldn't expect those size of waves. So you really wanted to, make sure that your rounding was smooth in that type of waves. You want to make sure you're, especially on a bell buoy, you don't want to be too close to the mark, but you don't want to be giving up too much room either. Any comments on that Windward mark rounding? We've got some videos we're going to go through here, Alex, but anything you saw there on the water that kind of got your attention?
Yeah, I think that in our opinion from the boat, we think that the good move would be a gybe set, and usually the reason for a gybe set is first thing is a pretty big right shift, and I think it's a geographical conditions is like you're getting pretty close to the dolphins on starboard, and another thing is you may have way more sailing on the port than on starboard because the course is not square. So you got to put that in equation. And I don't know, I just usually love to have an option to sail on both jibes kind of equally, just to keep options available going downwind, because if you run out of starboard and you see the right big puff coming down and you can't really jibe because you're already super close to the land, it's kind of bummer because you can't use the buffs. So maybe keep it square downwind. It definitely helps a lot, so you can peek out of the options. That's my comment on that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks a lot, Alex. So here we got a quick video. This is how you execute a jibe set. So I think this is Team Phoenix on the water. As you can tell, there's a little bumpy out there. As you can see, my boat bouncing around. Luckily, my camera had a little bit of stabilization on it. Hopefully, no one gets too seasick off this video. So what you do is you put your jibe in. You have your kite set up on the other side, so not the traditional side. You get the kite up as soon as you jibe. As soon as the kite is full, you take the jib down, or you furl the jib, whichever technique you use. Nice job there. The boat got moving. They're down course now. Kite's up. We're going to watch that again. So they're approaching on starboard. Soon as basically the middle of the boat gets to the mark, they can start bearing off. Big main sheet ease. Go right into a jibe. Usually you're coming out of this a little bit hotter because the jibe, it's a big turn, like a 270-degree turn. Keep the boat moving, get that kite up, keep the jib up to hide the kite a little bit. Once that kite gets full, you want to get the jib out of there, so either furl it or drop it to the deck, and you're off and racing. So that is how you execute a jibe set. So exit angle at the mark. So this happens a lot in distance racing and especially in or distance racing and racing where you don't have a person setting the mark, so they can't move the mark around. So like if there's a big right shift, left shift, they'll move the weather mark for you. So the technically the course is square. So here you'll see in this video is everyone rounds the mark as if the wind was basically going straight down at it. And that wasn't the case. There was a big kind of right shift. So everyone was coming in the mark a little bit overstood here. And then they go to try to bear off like as if the wind was directly downwind, and they almost overturn and almost jibe the boat. So you want to kind of put that into your head that just because you're rounding a weather mark, and you see this all the time, or not all the time, is they'll think that you just bear off, you head directly back down to the finish line. But that's not the case. You got to look at your apparent wind angle. You got to see actually where the wind is coming. So with this big right shift, you weren't able to point right down towards Kitsilano. You actually were pointing towards UBC. So you'll see it actually both boats while rounding this kind of do an overturn. So I'm pretty sure this is Ultraman here. So they've got to the mark. And the big waves don't help either. So if you're super downwind, the boat starts getting unstable. So you can see there the whole main just backed. Okay, just backed again. So they're pretty low there. And then that wave almost kicked their stern and almost jibed them. Okay, sorry about my Bimini stanchion there. Definitely in the way. You can see through coming up here. So a little bit better of a starboard or starboard ley line. Okay, so they weren't over. So you can see Ultraman now correcting. So you can see this one. So you can see the driver. He's unlured. He thinks he's going back down to Kits. Woo! You see that whole main almost inverted there. You can see on the way back, the top batten actually cleared the backstay and is now caught. They've kind of realized that they went a little bit too low there. So they're starting to come back up. Ease on the backstay is probably pretty important in this one. Just it's a lot of stuff's happening there. They've got the kite full again, but if you notice, there's a lot of driving going on just on that 1/8 of the race course. If they would have just rounded and kind of picked a heading and kept it and got the kite up and filled, they would have been further down the race course. Anytime you're using your stick, especially downwind, or your rudder, moving it around, you're going to be slowing the boat down. So smaller tiller movements, which means smaller rudder movements, which creates allows your boat to go faster downwind, and the rudder ends up acting like a brake if you're moving it around too quickly. Did that all make sense, Alex? Any comments you want to talk about either that jibe set or try to find the correct exit angle when coming out of a mark like that?
Probably I think that another secret was a jibe set. When you're approaching the mark, you probably want to point slightly higher than the mark. And like that's what Phoenix is doing here. They're pointing higher than the mark, but probably could have been even a bit higher. They're starting to bear away. So you want to leave the room. If you stop here, you just want to leave enough room here between the mark and the boat. Like at the moment when you start to bear away and when you exit on your port side jibe, you want to be close to the mark. It's not necessarily as important in these conditions, like when you have like one boat rounding the mark, but when you have let's say 5-10 boats lined up and everyone wants to jibe set, it's pretty important to be right on that mark so no one can take the higher lane and cover you there. So staying touch higher than the mark and leaves the gap in between, it's a key element. And here as they jibe and guys start hoisting, like if you have dialed in team with a lot of experience, sometimes you can drop that jib a little bit, like probably like 20%, 25, just to open up the slot on the top a bit more so kite can start filling. And then when you see that kite already popped and you're good to go, you drop that jib down. So that's my comment on the jibe set. And make sure that your lazy kite sheet is clear, that there is no knots in it or anything, so it can go back and you can pop the chute. So that's probably it. And it's a really good point about the exit angle here, especially on the waves. I think it's very important when you hoist the kite in this kind of conditions. And so you pop the kite and you start ripping right away. You're not being floppy in the waves. So yeah, realizing your exit angle from the mark as a key element, I think, just to keep the boat moving all the time. So yeah, otherwise I think you covered it pretty good, Drew.
Thanks. Yeah, and then once you get the kite up and you start moving, your apparent wind, the boat speed increases, so you're going to be more stable in those waves. But when you turn around and you've let your mainsail out, the boat kind of slows down, right? And those waves will make you unstable. Then once you get the kite up and you get underneath the kite, you'll be able to bear off a little bit. But in that really wavy stuff, make sure you're not too low, or else you're going to get really unstable and end up driving around a lot. So I think that was a good example of that. And you can see both these teams are very good sailors. So I just quickly wanted to chat about the final leg. Really challenging final leg. Who thought we would be out in like 12 knots and choppy stuff at the bell buoy, and then by the finish leg there was no wind, and you could have a drifter up. So there was a dying breeze. When you see yourself or you're out in the race course and this dying breeze is happening, it's the head out of the boat situation. So it's like where like the tacticians, he's biting off his fingernails, like what is the next move? Because there's unlimited possibilities of what's going to happen, and things happen different ways and different days. And just because it happened this way on a Saturday when you're racing the same breeze doesn't mean the same thing's going to happen again. So I always use other boats for clue that what's going to happen. So you've got a few fleets around you. So you're looking at the boats ahead of you to see what's happening up forward and what they're doing and who's making gains up there. You're looking at the fleet behind you and seeing where the wind's coming from. And a lot of the time downwind, I don't find people look behind them enough, but I was looking forward to try to catch the boats ahead of them. But what you really need to be doing is looking behind you, because that's where the wind's coming from. So you can see if boats are picking up speed, if they're sailing different angles. So you can pick up these little clues to see what the next wind might be bringing you, and using other boats as clues to kind of figure out the puzzle, because that was definitely a puzzle. And there was two decisions there. So the fleet was coming down, and the fleet kind of everyone ran into no breeze. And then what happened was, first guy to do it was Phoenix, and there was this breeze that was going down the land, and they sailed basically around the fleet and in this breeze, and then sailed towards the finish line. But at the finish line, there was still no wind. So eventually they had to jibe in and start sailing towards no wind. Another thing you could do, in case the wind is filling, and if you stuck out, like they were going to run that second race, the wind did come down. You could just sit there and kind of wait, and hope that they're sailing extra distance, but the wind's going to fill here shortly, and we're going to be in the right spot. Now we're going to be closer to the finish line than if we tried to sail over towards Royal Vancouver to get into that breeze. We're going to sit here and wait. And that might have been, Ultraman. They were way over on course right, downwind left-hand side. And they were just kind of in that position where they couldn't really make it all the way over there. So they were just crossing their fingers. They made their bed and they had to sleep in it. If the breeze did fill down a little bit quicker, they would have been in a good position. If the breeze would have filled down the right course, right or left-hand downwind, they would have been good condition. Vandergag they were kind of right in the middle there. And he actually started, and we were watching him, and everyone was basically dead still and no wind. And he almost started sailing back up towards the bell buoy. He had like -4 knots VMG. And that's a pretty risky maneuver, because you're currently sailing almost upwind with a spinnaker away from the finish line to go towards wind that's filling down the bay. Did it work out for Jason this time? Yes, it did. The wind didn't fill down. There was like Legacy, the Far 30, and they were kind of trying to make their way back, but they weren't fully committed. Like they weren't sailing upwind with their kite like Jason was to get back to that breeze. And at one point, this little bit of breeze came down and filled, and it looked like them just kind of holding position was going to pay, but then it kind of receded, and the boats that kind of sailed out to the right were kind of coming in with some heat and towards the finish line and finished a little bit earlier. Saying that, not all the time that works. Sometimes, Jason would go sail for that wind, and the wind would fill down, and all the boats that were just sitting still in the middle of the course that try not to sail that extra distance get the wind first. Now they're still further down the race course, and they finish a little bit earlier. So that time it definitely worked out for Jason and the team. So very good call by them. Saying that, sometimes holding the position and waiting for that wind to fill works as well. So it's got to be a tactician's game call. You got to keep your head out of the boat, and you got to make the best decision you have with the cards that are dealt with you. I think that kind of made sense. Does that make sense, Alex? Any comment?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I think it was like what we saw there on the last downwind legs. It was like quite a few boats leading by quite a bit, and they were tied up to one scenario, and some boats in the middle, like Jason, they did a fantastic race. Like they had the option open to gybe in and sail around the fleet, and the same happened for the Phoenix. And as I was mentioning before, like sailing downwind, especially in these fluky conditions, I really like to keep the both options open, because as Ultraman teams, they got locked on the port side of the course, and they couldn't done anything else. And the guys who were kind of in the middle of the course, they had an option open to get closer to the shore and start sailing with a new breeze and reach out the finish line quicker. So that's kind of my comment. And as it was a good saying, like you deal with the cards what you've got. So no matter what's going on and no matter how painful it is, just keep grinding and working the situation. So eventually you're gonna get there. I just remember like how you and I stuck outside Van Isle, and all of a sudden the breeze was filling up from a bit different side. The forecast changed, and then we were like, oh, what can we do? We can't really sail 100 nautical miles back and play it around.
Yeah, you got to stick with your game plan for sure. And sometimes it's painful, and you didn't make the right call, but as long as you stick to your game plan and your crew supports you, if you're a tactician, you make the call and you make your bed, you got to sleep in it. And I think that downwind leg is kind of a good example of a lot of distance racing we do here in the Pacific Northwest, where it's very geographical, and sometimes you're racing around islands where you'll run into pockets like that. Other times, you're racing 24 to 48 hours, so you get some times where the wind dies off due to whatever night or systems coming through, and it's a bit of a restart, and kind of figuring out if what your next plan is at that restart is very important. And a lot of races are made and lost in the Pacific Northwest in that light air, and trying to make the best decision for your team. And sometimes that best decision is sailing like a 60-degree apparent wind angle back towards the windward mark like Jason did, and getting out back into that breeze and then sailing around. So sometimes it's a little against the grain in terms of thinking. But if that's your game plan and that's what you want to do, execute it and see if it works. And if it doesn't, it's a learning lesson. At least you tried. No one's perfect. We have so many uncontrolled variables out there. You do the math equation in your head and try to figure out what you think is best for the team and your boat, and kind of try to execute it. And there's that's all you can do out there. And not everyone, it doesn't matter how good of a sailor you are, no matter if you have Olympic medals or if you're just a weekend warrior, people are going to make right decisions out there, and people are going to make wrong decisions. The biggest thing is kind of learning about them, maybe jotting them down if you have a logbook, and kind of trying to not make the same mistake twice. Saying that sailing is definitely a sport you might make the same mistake twice, but just trying to figure out what some high risk and low risk maneuvers are, and kind of putting them into your playbook. I think that's the final slide tonight. I didn't want to keep you. I ran a little over time there, guys. Sorry for holding you up. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I really like supporting this polar bear racing. A lot of lot of boats out there, a lot of fun racing, you know, on a sunny winter day. There's nothing better than being out on a sailboat racing around English Bay. If anyone is looking for new sails, I do have a promo on now. If you need new sails for the summer sailing season, let me know. I'd love to take care of anybody. If you are in the rowing club, I'll make sure you're taken care of. I was actually down there today with Francis, measuring his boat up. So it was good to see you down your boat today, Francis. Hope, is there any questions? The chat room's a little quiet. And then it's okay. You know, we were just kind of chatting. Thanks, Edward. Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate that. No, it's been a good year, and you know, we'll continue supporting the Polar Bear series and the rowing club. I really like the vibe down at the yacht club and everything you guys are doing, and have fun out there, and feel free to continue to reach out to either Alex or I. Alex's email is on this slide. This is going to be recorded. Send him or myself an email if you guys have any questions. I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you so much, guys. Have a
Okay,
good
see
one.
you, everyone.